Hey, it's Shahar. Welcome back to my channel, to the Witchy Reader. So I'm going to now read a snippet from my Jasmine Press prequel book, Pierce of Heart, The Tale of Two Sisters. There is a chapter in the third book called The Tale of Two Sisters where you first hear the tale of Rosemary and Lilac, who are characters you knew throughout the entire series, and you finally get to learn more about their life from that tale. And this book is basically actually getting into it and getting into their life, and is a kind of a villain origin story with Lilac, as she's the villain in the series. So you get to see her and it's like several years. So you see her like very little, and then you kind of see her grow up and embracing the darkness and becoming who was in the original series. Um, and Rosemary, you also know Elex. You do not know. He was mentioned in that one chapter that where it spoke about their tale. But he was not actually in the book because he is dead. Well, technically Rosemary's dead too, but that is another story for another time. Anyways, so this is chapter 16, Fire, part 1. I will only be reading part 1 to build suspense, so you have to read the book if you want to find out what happens in part 2 of this chapter. Rosemary and Nathaniel danced as everyone watched. Rosemary's wedding gown was stunning and one of a kind. It was a beautiful ceremony, and now they were enjoying the after celebration. Nathaniel looked snazzy himself. He spun her around a couple of times before pulling her close. It looked like they were about to kiss when Nathaniel suddenly dipped Rosemary. She laughed loudly, and he chuckled to himself as he swung her back upward, her hair swinging in her face. Grinning, Nathaniel moved her hair out of her eyes and placed a soft kiss on her lips, causing her cheeks to pinken. Everyone else began joining the newlywed couple on the dance floor. Luciana handed Allura to their nanny as Elex held his hand out to her. She grinned as she accepted his outstretched arm and let him lead her to the dance floor. He pulled her close as they danced gracefully. They were truly in sync. You could just watch them and see that. You can see in their movements and eyes and how much they mean to one another. Their love is all in their body language and eyes. Every time they hear the other's voice or sees them, their entire demeanor changes. Their eyes soften. They have the kind of relationship everyone dreams of. They're equals as they run their kingdom. They trust one another completely, let each other do their own thing, and then come back together. Every time they meet up, they act as if they haven't seen each other in a year. When they look at one another, it's as if they are seeing one another for the first time. Lilac watched her brother and sister dancing with their spouses. Then she then here she was, all alone, across the room, hiding in the dark. She smoothed out her dress, puffed out her chest, and stepped into the light. Her heels carried across the ballroom as she took a look round. Her fingers traced the edge of a window as she saw the sun shining through. She saw the nanny off by herself, holding Allura in her arms. She had short gray hair and was a bit on the bigger scale. Alex had always been really thin. Lilac had more meat on her bones, but was pretty thin herself. But Rosemary was more in the mid area, not thin but not overweight. Luciana was bigger than Rosemary, which used to make her insecure. But all that changed once she met Elex. Lilac let out a sigh. Lilac's dark brown eyes scanned the ballroom. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves, but not her, never her. She moved her hand through her hair and rolled her eyes. She hates her long hair. She wishes she could have the royal hairdresser. Uh, the royal hairdresser cut it shorter, but around here it's not proper for a woman, especially not a princess, to have short hair. Rosemary walked over to her, a grin plastered on her face as she was laughing. Want to dance, little sis? Rosemary asked. Lilac wanted to say no, but thought better of it. After her talk with Elex, she wasn't feeling as dark and gloomy as she usually does. Lilac managed a small smile, and this time it wasn't faked. Sure, Lilac replied. Rosemary's eyes brightened as she grabbed her sister's arm and dragged her to the dance floor. Elex smiled at the sight of his sisters dancing, and Luciana nudged him to join them. He stared at her, letting his eyes do all the speaking. She smiled, nodding reassurance before leaving. He pulled her close by the waist and kissed her passionately. She bit her lower lip, watching him dance with his sisters for a moment, before returning to her daughter. The three siblings danced for a while, laughing, joking, teasing, having fun for the first time in forever. And for a moment, just a moment, everything seemed right with the world. Lilac ran through the flames that soared through the palace halls. She was looking for her siblings, Luciana and Allura. They weren't in Alex's bedchambers or the nursery, flames dancing on her hair, the edge of it singeing from the fire's heat. Her heart pounded in her chest. The sweat that glistened off her tanned skin made her wound on the palm of her hand sting. She ran inside Rosemary's bedchambers, the heat of the metal doorknob not even bothering her. But Rosemary wasn't there, neither was Elex, Luciana, or Allura. But the room wasn't empty. A girl wasn't there. The same little girl from her dreams, Jasmine. Then, before Lilac's very eyes, the little girl transformed into a beautiful doll. Jasmine had long and wavy brown hair, chocolate brown eyes. She wasn't that much taller than Lilac. She wore a royal dress and a royal tiara. She levitated high off the ground. Her eyes turned pure white. A white aura shined around her, as bright as the sun. It blinded Lilac as she looked away, and her eyes closed. Once she landed and the light disappeared, Lilac finally opened her eyes again, and Jasmine had worn a beautiful dress. Her dress was golden, the sleeves short, revealing her shoulders. Silver glitter shined the top of her dress, the bottom trimmed in a beautiful lace. A silver jade embroidered in the center. She wore a breathtaking golden tiara with 3 ruby gems that made her hair shine, 2 on the sides and 1 in the middle, displayed higher. Her hair now had blood-red streaks in it. Jasmine landed back on her feet, staring at the smallest pierced sibling. Despite her mind yelling at her to run away from the stranger, her feet stepped closer to her. Lila felt drawn to her, connected to her, but she didn't understand it. Who is this girl? Why does she feel this way towards her? The balcony door swung open, revealing the pouring night sky. As you could hear thunder, it had caused Lilac to jump. Lightning struck not far from the balcony, momentarily lighting up the dark balcony, and Lilac could have sworn she saw Rosemary. Rose? Lightning struck again, but Rosemary was gone. Jasmine ran past Lilac and out of the bedroom. Lilac watched her leave, took one last glance at the balcony, and then followed the strange girl. Lilac watched Jasmine as she used her magic to avoid the fire. She never slows down. She really knows what she's doing. I think she has general magic. Lilac forced her legs to keep carrying her, despite her feet throbbing inside her heels. Jasmine rounded a corner. Lilac rounded the same corner and stopped, trying to catch her breath. Jasmine was leaning down over a dead body. The body was burnt, but as Lilac's eyes filled with tears, she knew exactly who that was. Elex, Lilac choked out. She fell to her knees beside her brother's body. Hot tears rolled down her cheeks. She could barely make a sound, except a few high-pitched noises. She put her hand on his chest, but the heat radiating off his body didn't affect her. Head she leaned her head down over his body, pleading for him to wake up, to be okay, to be alive, to be her older brother again. You promised you would always be here, Lex, Lila commented, staring into his unblinking eyes and trying to shake him awake. Don't leave me. I can't do this without you. But there was no life behind his light brown eyes. She let out a couple sobs as she closed his eyelids. She looked up to see Jasmine was walking away. Jasmine turned back, giving her a knowing look before disappearing in the smoke that was created by the fire. Luciana walked out of the restroom of their bedchambers, finishing putting on her second earring to find Elex shirtless. She smiled at him, placing one hand on his bare chest and placed a gentle kiss on his lips. He grabbed her waist and pulled her closer, deepening the kiss. They both smiled into the kiss, their noses touching. You are stunning, darling, Elex told her. Luciana's cheeks turned a light shade of pink. You do not look bad yourself. He placed a kiss on the tip of her nose, another soft kiss on her lips, before finally pulling apart from the love of his life. Elex put on his shirt and his favorite brown jacket, while Luciana put on her locket. Elex got it just for her after Laura was born. It's golden and heart-shaped. When you open it, there's a picture of the 3 of them together. As she looked at her reflection in her vanity mirror, she smiled to herself as she held onto the locket, keeping it near her heart. He came up behind her, causing her smile to widen. He couldn't see over her, so he moved to her side, wrapping his arms around her waist as she wrapped her arms around his shoulders. He placed a kiss on his temple, causing her to face him. They were so close that they could feel each other's body heat. She kissed his forehead, causing him to blush. They both held on to one another, their eyes closed and foreheads touching. Can we just stay in bed all day? Luciana asked. That is a very tempting proposition, Elex replied. I might hold you on that. Their lips touched in a sweet yet passionate kiss. Lala jerked awake, screaming from the top of her lungs. Her face fell in front of her face, but she didn't care. She gripped the side of her bed with all her energy as if she thought she might fall off. She was breathing heavily, her chest heaving. She was drenched in sweat. She could feel the heat from the fire. Dry tears were on her sickly pale cheeks. There was a lump in the back of her throat. She tried to swallow it, but to no avail. Fresh tears fell from her eyeballs. She couldn't control it. Closing her eyes shut tightly, Lila could see Alexa's dead body clearly, too clearly for her comfort. Her muscles were tense. She could barely form a complete thought. The only thing she could think about was her brother's dead body before her. It would terrify her, and it felt all too real. That's what terrified her. Not the fire, not that Jasmine girl, not Rosemary flickering before her eyes. It was that it felt real, especially the part about Elex. His death seemed not real, seemed true. She coughed. feeling smoke in her lungs again. She forced herself to relax as she got to her feet. She breathed in and out a few times, trying to get her breathing back under control and trying to calm herself, but she soon discovered it wasn't that easy. Lala looked out the window by her bed, which was across the bedroom from the balcony. Her dark brown eyes scanned the area. She found Luciana by the flowers. Her long and very straight blonde hair lay flat against her back. She wore a green headband to match her stunning green dress. She always did like wearing a lot of headbands. She tended to keep her hair down and used the headbands to keep her hair out of her face. Luciana bent down and picked up an ilex flower, plucking it from the ground. As she got back up, she had a small smile on her lips as she brought the single flower to her nose. The gardener walked up behind her and she turned around, talking to him for a moment before walking inside. Lila traced the outline of the window with two of her fingers, trying to clear her mind of the dark thoughts that had plagued her. She had to see Lex. She had to. The fire. She needed to know that he was okay. She knows it was just a nightmare, but it felt real. She needed to be sure. She needed to see him for herself, to see him alive, breathing, feel his skin and heartbeat. Her brother had to be alive. Elex had to be alive. Lilac turned her back on the window, feeling the sunlight hit her back as she walked out of the bedchambers, but what she didn't see was the window catch fire, right where her fingers had traced. But the fire began to grow rapidly and out of control. Elax sat in the rocking chair that was in the nursery. He rocked back and forth with Laura in his arms as he sang her a lullaby. She stretched out her tiny arms as she yawned. Elax smiled to herself as she watched his daughter fall asleep. Carefully and gently he got up and placed her in her crib. He heard footsteps as Lilac ran inside, her heels clicking on the hard floor beneath them. She put his fingers to his lips. Lilac just stood there, taking in the sight of her brother of being alive, being right in front of her. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. Her lips were pursed together. Her hands shook as her chest heaved. Her back was straight. Her skin was paler than usual. He watched with a raised eyebrow, curious about why she's acting so strange. He led her outside the nursery and down this hall, passing the nanny. Elex let go of her arm and faced her once by the wall at the far end of the hall. They stood by a window, the light shining through. What is wrong, Elex asked. She just kept staring at him, saying nothing. She tried to let her eyes speak for her, but Elex does. Like Elex does, but she just looked weird. She doesn't understand how he can do that. Sighing, Elex dragged her back down the hall and inside his bedchambers. Elex, Lilac choked out. It was the best she could do at the moment. The nightmare had felt so real. She thought she had actually lost Elex, that he had died. She woke up in sweat and in tears. A sadness pained her chest but there was also the feeling of guilt in her gut, like she blamed herself for the fire, for his death. Just thinking about it right now is making her eyes fill to the brim with tears. She felt a lump in her throat as a couple of tears rolled down her cheeks. Ella gripped her shoulders, staring at her intently. Talk to me, Lilac. What's wrong? Lilac's chest went up and down as she tried to calm down and tried to find the right words. I had a nightmare. What was it about? Several things, but the thing that really got to me was your death. Sighing, Alex moved his hands from her shoulders and grabbed her hands in his, squeezing them, reassuring. It was just a bad dream. Her tears were uncontrollable at this point, but it felt so real. You were dead, Alex. You had died. I crawled up to your body because I couldn't leave you. Alex tucked a lock of hair behind her ear and wiped away tears with his thumbs. Hey, look at me, Lilac. Look at me. I am right here, alive, and by your side. I am not dead, and I will not die. Lilac slowly nodded, finally calming her muscles. The door swung open, causing both Elex and Lilac to look up in unison. A servant stood there, eyes wide with fear. He was visibly shaking, his chest heaving. Fire! There's a fire in the palace. Lilac's heart dropped. Alex's entire demeanor changed as he straightened his back. Get everyone you can out now, Elex ordered, and stay safe. The servant nodded and ran down the hall. Alex grabbed Lilac's hand and dragged her out of the room and down the hall until they reached Lilac's bedchambers, then dragged her to her own balcony. There was a large tree just outside it. It had been destroyed by her magic, but Rosemary had used her own magic to fix it as it had never been destroyed to begin with. Alex forced his sister to meet his eyes. Do you think you could get on that tree and climb down? Lilac pitted down the railing and slowly nodded. I think so. Then go. Now. Lilac looked up at him. And you will be right behind me? Alex shook his head. No. What? Why? I need to find out family and save them. No, Lilac screamed in tears. You cannot go out there. I have to. You will die. I cannot lose you. Silent Lex grabbed hold of her shoulders, trying to get her to shut up. I have to. My wife and daughter need me, and so does and so does our sister. I will not die. I will return to you. I promise. He held her, nodding. Lila gave him a hug. He held her on the railing, and she reached out to the branch, and grabbing hold of it, she looked down at him as he held out onto her wrist. They stared at one another for a moment, and he gave her a small nod of encouragement. A determined glance sparkled in her eyes, and she jumped, her legs landing on a thick branch, and she held on to the branch above her as it kept her steady. Do you have this? Alex asked. Yes, Lilac replied. Climb down and find a safe place to hide. He turned around and headed for the door. Elex! He turned, looking over his shoulder at her. Elex was so focused on saving his family and his people that it was keeping him stable, helping him have a goal to keep in mind, to focus him, and to keep him steady. But Lilac was terrified, and she wasn't ready, and she wasn't trying to hide it. They remained silent, letting their eyes speak for them. I will return to you, little sister. I promised, and I always keep my promises. You better, big brother, Lilac told him. Elex ran down the hall as she watched him leave. And that was that chapter. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe, and I'll chat with you guys next time.